Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Frank Foti is with us, inventor of Omnia audio processing. We got stories about Carly Simon, Steely Dan, the Raspberries, even Abbey Road Studios, and some good ideas about audio processing in the future. It's coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we're talking about everything from the microphone to that light bulb there at the top of the tower. And today, talking about several things important that come in between those two things. I'm Kirk Harnack in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, where it's a beautiful hot summer day. Air conditioners cranking and the birds are chirping. It's just a gorgeous day outside. We got rid of all our thunderstorms yesterday, so it's going to continue to be nice. Maybe the power and the internet will stay on. We got a great show up ahead for you today, including a great tip of the week at the end of the show. So you'll want to make sure you watch or listen to the whole show. Don't just skip ahead to the tip of the week. Stay tuned for the whole thing. We got a lot of good content coming for you. And my guest is a gentleman who I have known for a long, long time. And I'm so proud to say it and glad to. Met him before my employment tenure at the Telos Alliance. And that's Frank Foti. Frank, welcome in. Good to see you.
Well, Kirk, thank you. And while you're sitting in a nice air-conditioned studio, I'm coming to you live and direct from the Blueberry Railroad in Geneva, Ohio, where you can see New York Central number 5329, also known as Vito, who wants to be a part of. He's probably going to steal the show today. You know, the fact he's in the live Steve Mafia. So, Kirk, thank you very much for having me on to talk about all things processing.
Well, most people who know you, Frank, know about your passion for trains. And if you would, give us a little one-paragraph chronology. You got started with something called East Wind, right?
Well, I got started as, I was about yay high, sitting in front of the Christmas tree, watching an American Flyer train go around and around. And then back in about 2004, I always knew of the eighth scale live steam hobby, and I got involved with it and was able to acquire a locomotive that most folks in our industry have come to learn about, East Wind. And, what was about 3 years ago, East Wind actually made an appearance out at NAB in Vegas, and we played trains with a bunch of customers and friends. And actually today, I kind of broke away from him. He's sitting about 100 feet outside the building where I'm at, cooling his wheels, if you will, after getting dirty and burning some coal today.
So I've had the pleasure of riding behind East Wind. You engineering. What's the right word for that? When you're driving? What's that?
Well, you're close. I mean, on the full size locomotive, you have an engineer. Who's out the guy in the throttle, the brakes, and you have the other guy who's the fireman. Well, I don't have room for two, so I'm the engineer and fireman. So
okay.
Basically, I am the engineer, as my dad would tease me about.
Your next locomotive was a little guy named Jake, but I've never gotten to ride behind Jake. What's Jake all about?
Jake's the same scale, but he's much smaller. He's actually he's about the he's like a replica of like the General, which is located actually not too far from where you're at. It would have been like a Civil War type locomotive. I acquired that locomotive because, one, I thought he was adorable, but a member in our club had passed on, and I didn't want to see Jake be acquired by somebody outside our club. So I acquired him. He needed a little bit of work, and actually there's a chance this Saturday I might have him out at the Club Railroad. And then a couple years ago, I have a version of locomotive that actually will be here in Ohio in the fall, known as Nickel Plate 765. It's a locomotive that's known as a Berkshire. We refer to him as Nick, he's short for Nickel Plate. He's actually a little bit longer and heavier than East Wind. It's about 1,000 pounds. And there's a rumor that in a few weeks he'll be in Tokyo to be in the. He'll be representing the mafia team in coal burning, and then behind me I got this other mafia guy known as Vito, who was a New York Central Hudson. And when we became friends, I told him, I said, "Look, you're going to Cleveland." He says he does hate the Yankees. He's a Mets fan, and now he's a Tribe fan. But he was doing a little bit of this Barzini business, Uncle Kirk. We're gonna crank on the dials. We're gonna rock and roll. We're gonna burn the beaches with this processing business. Kirk's like, soon, Frank. How soon did you take our program off the rails?
Yeah, exactly. We're 6 minutes in, and we're
Yep.
No, we're on the
and
we're on the
everyone's
rails.
already clicked out. Like we're the heck out of here, buddy.
Well, we've got a jam-packed show coming up this week in Radio Tech. Frank's going to talk about a bunch of topics, including and especially what's ahead in audio processing. Where do we go from here when things are almost as good as they can be, or are they? What are the concerns for processing for consumers to enjoy audio even better? Frank's going to have a war story or two coming up. Oh, those are great because they're always nail biters or just slap your pants kind of thing. And I'm going to talk about things like a group called the Raspberries and the song "Go All the Way." Remember that song? And how that song might be different if it sounded different from different processing. So lots to talk about, all coming up, including Frank's tip of the week coming up. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Nautel. Nautel's got a couple of offers going, and remember their Transmission Talk Tuesdays roundtable that you can participate in. You can not only watch, and you can just watch if you want to, but you can also participate. You can ask questions, give your advice, give your experience. But at Nautel, they got a couple of promotions going. They have a free second backup exciter. If you buy a GV series transmitter, you can get a second redundant exciter with your GV series transmitter. Contact your Nautel rep or go to nautel.com/offers to get that deal. The other deal is called the 4610 VS savings promotion. It's actually three offers in one. You get $4,000 off the purchase of a VS 2.5 transmitter. I've got one of these. Love the thing. It works great. It's been extremely reliable for us. Or you get $6,000 off the purchase of their VSHD digital exciter, and that's what gives you HD in through the VS 2.5. Or you can add those two things together because of math and get $10,000 off your purchase of both of those. Again, go to nautel.com/offers to get more information on that. Nautel.com/offers. And finally, Transmission Talk Tuesday is continuing on Tuesdays in July. This July 20th, which would be the next possible Tuesday after we do this show, the topic is transmitter site quirks. So what's weird about your transmitter site and how do you deal with it? Or what's weird about some other people's site? I have worked at transmitter sites where some days the only way to get there was with a boat. I much would rather have it been a coal-powered, a steam-powered train, but no, some days the only way to get there was a boat. Other places, the only way to get there was a four-wheel drive. Other days, the only way to get there was to hike to it or take a helicopter. So I've been to all those kind of sites, but there's more quirks than that. That's all coming up July 20th and July 27th. They're going to explain the Rf Toolkit, which is a suite of software from Nautel that really will help you out in plotting a lot of things and planning a lot of things. Nautel.com/webinars is the website where you go sign up for that. Easy to sign up. Nautel.com/webinars. Thanks, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Kirk Harnack in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, and Frank Foti, who is out in Geneva, Ohio. And Frank, I would love to talk about trains the whole time, but we have other stuff that we're gonna have to cover.
Not a problem, Kirk. Not a problem.
I would like to understand, Frank, your love for trains and your love for audio processing, and I know that there is conceptually some relationship between these two things, whether it's satisfaction of a job well done or whether it's the actual process of turning different ingredients into something very useful at the end of it. What's a thought or two of yours about the relationship of steam engines and audio processing?
Well, yeah, Kirk, that's a great question. I think the best way I can answer it for you is that I've always been interested, all the way back to when I was extremely young, in learning how things work. And this is like what they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My father I'd get to visit with my dad on the weekends, and he was always working on something. My dad, God love him, and he works to this day at age 90 because that's his love. My father's a mechanical engineering genius, and I'm not saying that just because he's my dad. He is, and he was always. I would always watch him work on things, not just to figure it out or not just to fix it, but how can he make it better? And he'd do that with my electric train. He'd do it if my phonograph wasn't working right or something. And I just loved it. Well, to the same effect, I came in love with like this whole thing about electronics. You know, the whole, you know, those of us of our generation, you know, can reflect back to tube testers and early test equipment, things of that nature. And my dad had it. So, I mean, that just made it work for me. So, you know, now today, you know, one of the things like on this locomotive here, we're having to do some modifications to it so that it'll operate in the gauge that we operate in, which means we got to, guess what, modify something. Well, in audio processing, back when I worked in radio, my mentor in broadcast engineering was a gentleman by the name of Jim Somich. God rest his soul. Too bad he's not with us anymore. But Jim was another one. It's like, and he gave me the nickname Foti. And he'd say, Foti, let's see if we can't figure out a way to, you know, we had these Pacific Recorders multi-limiters on WMMS at the time, late 70s. He'd say, Foti, let's see if there's a way we can't eliminate the pre-emphasized limiter in those multi-limiters so they don't sound dull. And, you know, we were always trying to figure something out. And it played right into what you know, the stuff that went back to those experiences I had with my dad. And I just ate it up. I mean, I can vividly recall times that we had in what was the workshop at the old location for WMMS and WHK, and I learned a lot about it, and that led me to always wanting to, how could I figure something out? How could I make this work? And it's the same with the locomotives, and it's the same within the hobby. I mean, there's a lot of other things that we do within this hobby that's beyond just running the locomotives or working on them and things of that nature. So I think it's that inquisition, you know, of the mind of like trying to figure something out. What could we do to either maintain it or, in many ways, make it better? And you know, as I look back, and it started out as cutting edge in 1988, but it's always been this journey of what else could we do? What can we do to make whatever is the status quo? Okay, that's great. How do we take the next step? And then when we take that next step, excuse me, Vito, could you calm down a little bit? We're trying to have a broadcast here, okay? Oh my gosh. These guys, they just get out of control. But in any case, Kirk, to answer your question, it goes to the Captain Kirk thing. You know, that's kind of poetic justice, Captain Kirk.
Yeah, sure,
you know, on Star Trek, you know, trying to find that new frontier, and then when you get there, you push it out again. And you know, to this very day, I'm doing that. So, you know, if it's, you know, and the crazy thing is, and I realize I'm rambling here, but when I'm doing this stuff, my mind is working in the background on stuff that's audio algorithm wise. And then there's times when I'm sitting around with audio algorithms in the background, my mind is working on stuff that affects these guys.
You know, that's very similar to, you've heard the story about Hilmer Swanson with Gates, right? And he was a farmer, and he would invent things while he was sitting on the tractor farming a field. So, yeah. At some point, Frank, you transitioned from modifying other people's boxes to saying, you know what, I'm past that now. I'm gonna have to make my own box. What was that? What triggered that for you that said, okay, I can't modify somebody else's box anymore. I need to start from scratch?
Oh no, Kirk, that's easy, and this goes back to my radio days. You know, a lot of times I affectionately refer to the shop at Z100 as like That was a test bed for a lot of stuff. What became the Vigilante was born at Z100, and that came about because, the market there being so competitive, and I mean, now all these years later, I can say, all the guys at WPLJ, my buddy Paul Sanchez, who was at WBLS at the time, the guys over at, it started out as, Hot 103, then Hot 96. I mean, these guys knew their stuff. So where for a while Z100, there was a gap. Well, those guys closed that gap pretty quickly. So it wasn't like there were no more tweaks you could do with the stock Optimod or Texars or, the stuff that was available to us at the time. And all that stuff was great. None of my comments are meant to be, please, anyone, don't take them the wrong way. But it was almost like, okay, I've got a cool car and it can do good on drag racing, but Kirk's car is just as good. If I want to get that little extra, just like in the movie, Spinal Tap, that little extra push over the top to go from 10 to 11, it was going to take going inside. And yours truly would spend hours like studying and playing around. I would take the backup audio chain, because we had redundant audio chains. And late at night, I would monkey around with the thing on the bench. And after midnight, I'd, try different things, knowing full well, you're dealing with New York City's #1 radio station. But I guess I had enough quiet confidence myself to try things, and knock on wood, they worked. So it actually does go back to the days at Z100.
I realized that we started this show and we've been talking, Frank, without, there's some people new to the industry or new to you or new to what we talk about here. And we didn't properly introduce what you do or have done. And I'll put out there real quickly so we can move on. And that is the audio processing. That is a box or a process that takes audio and makes
I'm a janitor. I mean, look the way I'm dressed. I'm just a janitor. I'm a schmuck. I mean, let's just call a spade here.
well, every
how soon is this one over?
Almost every audio that you hear at the end of as a consumer, radio, TV, streaming, whatever, it's been processed in some way. And there's always been a competitiveness in radio processing because that's what radio has. It has audio. And so, in big markets, perhaps more competition. And Frank worked back in the 80s and through the 90s and even to today to make audio processing better and better. And there's lots of different philosophies about how to do that. And Frank, obviously with his company Cutting Edge that became Omnia, has done very, very well in providing people with tools to make their stations sound sweeter, louder, better, punchier, more enjoyable to listen to for long periods of time. So that's what we're talking about here. If for those of you who may be new to this, Frank, we got to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to understand from you kind of, it feels like we're at the 97th percentile in audio processing, and there's not a long way, not a lot farther to go in terms of loudness and punch and clarity, but you might have some different ideas. You may be working on some ideas that make a difference for people, or a whole systems redesign, like where does the processing need to go? And is the radio station transmitter the best place to do all the processing? And so we're going to talk about things like that coming up with Frank on This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. Our show's brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcasters General Store, a place where you can get all the whole product line from Innovonics. They make things that make your life a lot easier with broadcasting. We're going to hear from Innovonics. We'll be right back.
The Aaron 655 is the latest addition to the Innovonics family of rebroadcast receivers, designed specifically for FM broadcast translators, also referred to as relay transmitters. The Aaron 655 is unique as an uncompromising DSP-based HD radio and FM receiver combined with a powerful 3-band audio processor and dynamic RDS encoder. IP connectivity adds streaming capabilities, and a web browser interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. The Aaron 655 gives you maximum flexibility for program sources. Select program audio from analog FM, digital channels HD1 through 8, streaming sources, and analog or AES digital line inputs, all with assignable failover audio backup. The internal RDS encoder allows you to customize your RDS messaging. You can use incoming off-air RDS data, convert HD radio pad data to RDS, convert streamed metadata to RDS, or receive IP telnet data. Comprehensive audio processing includes gated and windowed AGC, a unique syllabic leveler, 3 bands of compression, and both wideband and independent HF limiting. Easy setup is achieved by using 10 factory presets and 10 customizable presets. The processor also supports day parting, allowing automatic preset changes to follow different programming formats throughout your broadcast day. The front panel has an OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup, advanced control, and editing for all operating parameters. The Aaron 655 dynamic web interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. A comprehensive set of menus includes a quick overview of now playing info, input-output control, processor options, RDS encoder, alarms and notifications, SNMP settings, and much more. You can also listen to the live audio broadcast streamed through the web interface.
Check out that Inovonics product, the Aaron 655, and all of them. Call BGS, Broadcaster General Store, at 352-622-7700. BGS, they have a website, sure, but they're really built just to take your call, talk to you live on the phone, make recommendations, or just take your order, give you information about delivery. They got their sharp pencils out for the best pricing, so give them a call at Broadcasters General Store, 352-622-7700. That's the number I've been dialing since I did engineering work for Sam Phillips in Memphis, the guy who discovered Elvis. Check him out. Thanks a lot, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack here in Nashville, Tennessee at the TELUS Alliance Studios. Frank Foti is our guest. And Frank, this is kind of a big philosophical topic. And I'm not sure, what you can let us in on, how much you can open the curtain and let the camel's nose in, or what you have to keep secret. But I'm really curious about, processing is at a really good state of the art, whether you want it slammed or easy or anywhere in between. And where do you think we're going from this point, Frank?
Well, Kirk, we got to be very careful because you got to keep your friends close and your competitors closer.
All right.
Kirk, honestly, the question that you bring forward has been brought to me quite a few times now. And it actually led to the development of what became Omnia 11. And I'm not saying that to make it a commercial. I didn't mean it as that. But, the short story on that, and this now dates back more than 10 years, was somebody said to me, there's loudness wars in various markets. Can you get any louder? People are claiming that we've gone too far, blah, 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 yada, 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 yada. And I remember Paul McLean from Radio World asking me this question, I think it was like at NAB. We did some interview, and he was quite pointed in his comments. And I said, Paul, the next step has to be, broadcasters are not going to allow us, or they're not going to purchase products where you're going to have to dial things back. What they want is competitive loudness. And I'm not saying this, gang, to promote loudness. I'm just not. I'm telling it to you, as somebody who's been in the trenches in radio and then, been in this business now doing this. So basically what it came down to was like, how do you allow us to maintain the competitive level in loudness, legally modulated, but how do we dial back into the audio signal, audio fidelity? And, I put a number of years in studying what was causing or what generated that packed up, overly compressed, at times distorted sound. And without going into a long dissertation here, it was actually fascinating work. And I came to develop some methods that we've, that were the basis of Omnia 11, and also at the same time, some of the things that I'd learned, I shared with my brother from another mother, Corny Gould, and because I took on the back end, which was the final limiter, and Corny wanted to take on to see if he could do things with regard to the multi-band compression and multi-band limiters, and he did a phenomenal job. I mean, I just can't say enough about the work that he did. But the thing that we learned and was that we were able to develop algorithms that had a bit of smarts to them. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but the key was understanding what mechanism generated intermod distortion. And whenever you're going to alter a signal, there's going to be, theoretically speaking, there's some level of intermodulation. I mean, that's how gain control works. We take a control signal and we're in essence multiplying or dividing it by the audio signal. And if you do it not in a careful fashion, it will generate audible intermod products. Well, we learned there were aspects of this that had to do with the final limiting, or clipping as most people would know, and peak limiting, and even a little bit that came down into the how the compressors operated. So what we did was we designed audio algorithms that were able to determine how the algorithm had to behave in a manner where we could mask or suppress intermod distortion. And being able to do that, we were able to maintain the loudness level, and in effect, I don't say enhance, but maintain fidelity. And now we did that at the beginning of what Omnia 11, when it first came out. Since Omnia 11's release, because when we did, I think, the version 3.0 software, that was almost like having a brand new audio processor. It was a whole new, suite of software that went into the same hardware, but in essence, it was it behaved like a brand new product. So rather than doing something where, customers had to fork out, full price for, the hardware and software, we just made it very affordable for a software upgrade, and it basically extended the life of the hardware. But to that effect, and even within the last few years, I've come across a few other methods that have taken the initial work that went into Omnia 11 and have raised the bar yet again. And again, it all comes down to what can we do with regard to dealing with the dynamics aspects and maintaining the fidelity in a manner of speaking by way of monitoring and controlling, or even some cases suppressing intermod distortion. And there's a lot to be said there. Now, that said, there are people out there that like that thick, what was that Jethro Tull album, Thick as a Brick? Heavy density, that like where it feels like your head's in a vice. There are people that really like that. Now, how do you get that? That's basically just dialing in intermod distortion. That's what it is. Now, is it, I'm always trying to, push the envelope to have it sound as clean and as loud as possible. But, suffice it to say, it's not my call. I mean, if somebody wants it to sound, have that effect, and by the way, if they want that effect, we know how to do that too. But for those that have wanted to say, hey, look, we're in a competitive environment. We need to be competitive, but we want to sound good. That part, we've been able to do.
I don't work in none of my radio stations that I own are in big markets. And it seems like, it's, at least speaking for myself as a station owner and as the owner of stations that do streaming, and as someone who listens to podcasts or other entertainment online, for me anymore, since there are so many other places to get audio these days than just AM or just FM, my interest is no longer, am I the loudest? I do want to be the most listenable. Now, that may be a moving object for different people, or different people have different definitions of what's the most listenable. And I got to tell you, I love the sound of my radio station streams, some of which are using the basic 3-band processor that I think you came up with most of this years ago. And it's very effective. And it's just, I never have to touch the volume, and it always sounds sweet. And a couple of my stations use the Omnia 9 style processing. Same thing there. It's a little bit louder, but it's always there, always sweet, always at the right level. Do you think radio may be dialing a bit more in that direction? Just be consistent, sound good, provide entertainment.
Yep. Well, I mean,
okay.
and Kirk, let's also realize that broadcasting, conventional broadcasting, AM, FM, they're challenged today like they've never been before. They're challenged by this thing, the form of if you've got a playlist or some streaming service, file-based stuff. I mean, that wasn't there, to the level that it is today. I mean, if you think back 10, 15 years today, broadcasters, if they're not thinking about the fact that they're competing with other platforms, they better be, and they better sound like it too.
Well, that brings to the fact the quick phrase that my competitor is not necessarily the guy down the dial or up the dial. My competitor is my own stream and my competitor's stream, or Spotify, or whatever other service you want. Because now you can get easily 20,000 different streams on your Wi-Fi radio or on your phone, and a lot of those are your competitors now.
Well, you're right, but there's something else you have to think about. In over-the-air radio, when you're button pushing, the ear is able to instantaneously hear the difference in sound between station A and station B. When you're, when you're selecting stream A to stream B, due to the buffering time, by the time you've gone from stream A to stream B, it's a number of seconds. I know there's going to be somebody out there who's going to go, no, Frank, I can tell the difference. I can tell that it's a quarter of a dB louder. Yeah, good luck. Because I got to tell you that even when I'm putzing around in the lab, I'm always trying to balance things so that I'm being fair when I go, okay, with what I'm working on, do I like A or do I like B? Or do I like the thing in bypass? And it all comes down to that, the retention, the memory retention level from the ear to the brain. It changes within a matter of milliseconds. And when you think that, when you go from, stream A to stream B, the buffering could be many seconds. So, as long as you're in the ballpark and you've got the signature you're looking for, you got it.
I must say, and I think you've been on the show since the time that the Omnia 11 version 3 came out, the Corny's front end that you talked about. I remember the first time I heard that, Frank, and again, I wasn't looking for the loudest thing, although it certainly can be. I heard that listening to a song I'm very familiar with, and my brain said, "That's how that's supposed to sound." And it did have an affected process sound, but my brain was, I like that. It wasn't that's slamming it. It wasn't that at all. It was like, it made my brain happy to hear the music processed that way.
Kirk, I'd like to reinforce it with kind of like a left-handed way. We got feedback on the new Omnia software many years ago. God rest his soul, Steve Church and I, we were sitting around one night and we were thinking, on one hand, we're always looking to get approval from the name broadcast engineers and program directors in our industry, but what if we could have feedback from someone that that really had great ears from the recording side of life, And at the time, Steve and I always would default to using the music of Steely Dan because of how meticulous it was recorded. The work that Roger Nichols, the engineer, and Gary Katz, the producer, and then, Donald and Walter, you've all heard the stories about, they would like edit in a single note at a time to get it the way they wanted. And we were always thinking, man, if there was a way that somebody from Steely Dan's, entourage could give us feedback, that would be it. If it was for audio codecs or audio processing or what have you. Well, fast forward to about 4 years ago, yours truly got a chance to meet and become friends with, professionally and personally, Gary Katz, the producer of Steely Dan. And I've spent time in the studio with Gary where, asked him his opinion of various things we worked on. And not only has Gary given us glowing feedback, he's taken me to other people who, are just as critical, Hugh Padgham over in England, Giles Martin, I think his dad had something to do with some 4 guys back from Liverpool in the early 60s. Frank Filippetti. And all these, every one of these guys have multiple Grammys, technical Grammys, and performance Grammys to their name. And every one of them have said to me, Frank, one of the things we like about the work that your company and you guys have done is you've been able to maintain the musical integrity to the audio, yet it's processed. And Frank Filippetti told me a great story. This probably goes back to 1985. Frank's studio at the time was in near Yonkers. And Frank's well known for having worked with everyone from Luciano Pavarotti to Carly Simon, James Taylor, Foreigner. And he's doing a recording with, they're doing a final mix down with Carly Simon. And Carly says, she kept going, Frank, I love you, but you just don't have it. There's something wrong. And finally, Frank, in frustration, said, Carly, I just don't know what you're looking for. And she said, Frank, come with me. And she took him out to her car. And she said, she got in her car, she turned the radio on. She goes, make my song sound just like that. It was Z100. So when Frank told me that story, he said, he's FF and I'm FF. So he's FF1, I'm FF2. He goes, you and I don't know it, but we were actually buddies long before we knew one another. So I'm saying all this because one of the things I've always tried to do, and not just me, but those on our team, we're working to deliver the sound that people want, but we want it to be musical. We want it to sound in the way that you described, Kirk. And when someone like the professionals who we've been able to get feedback from give us the feedback that we've received without where they gave it to us sight unseen. Need I say anything more?
Frank, I want to, after this commercial break, I want to follow up a bit on how knowing people in the recording industry have informed any decisions that you've made with audio processing, or what that's done. There's a great story about Carly Simon. Maybe you could stick with me for just a minute during this commercial break, because you engineered for plenty of radio stations, Z100 being one of them. Did you ever have talent wearing their headphones and get up from the desk after a spot break or after a break and forget they had their headphones on and pulled on that headphone cord and maybe did some damage? Did that ever happen? You ever have to fix headphone plugs?
Kirk, I will tell you, it never happened one single time. Not once.
Yeah.
Many times, but not once.
Really?
I can say how many tip ring sleeve connectors I had to solder back together, headphones had to fix, things in the console had to fix many times.
They'd either, the tip ring sleeve would either break off right here or get bent, or it would do damage to the jack on the audio console, or it would do damage where it connected to the headphones. Yeah. And so you kept all those things. Well, check this out. This is from our friend. This is from our friend Mike Dosh. This goes in line with your headphones. This is the 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve version. There's also a 3.5 millimeter or 1/8-inch tip ring sleeve version, and you can mix and match. You can go in as one and come out as the other. But check this out. If you walk away from the console wearing your headphones, watch what happens. Up, look at that. It just pulls apart. Like the gasoline hose that breaks without spilling gas everywhere. And look, it just goes right back together. It's similar to a MagSafe connector that you'll find on some Mac products. I guess now they're using USB-C. I really like the MagSafe. And look, it just goes right back together. If you put it together wrong, so your left and right are reversed, it doesn't go together. It doesn't want to stick. but you put it together correctly and it sticks. And like I said, this is the 1/4-inch version, 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve, but there's also a 3.5 millimeter, and it's the same magnetic connector here for both. So you can go in as one, 3.5 millimeter, for example, and come out as, so this can be your adapter too, between 3.5 millimeter and 1/4-inch. So, and you see, you could get up and walk away and bam, you don't have to pull it straight either. This could pull off to the side like that. I need to put this in front of my forehead so you can see it. There we go. Pull off to the side, pull off that side. And it's the right amount of pull. Really is. This is from Angry Audio. I should mention that. angryaudio.com. It's a brand new product. It's a list price is about $30 for that. And that will save you a ton of frustration. You can use it with, let's say, here's a headphone amp from Angry Audio. This one's actually under the Studio Hub name. And then I've shown you this one before. This one goes underneath the counter and you won't snag your pantyhose on this one. But if you walk away, look at this. I'll plug that in there. You walk away from this baby and bam, the MagSafe connector. It's not MagSafe. It's their design at Angry Audio. Their connector just comes right apart. Check it out. You can get these at your favorite broadcast equipment dealer like Broadcasters General Store. Hey, we got another quick message about MaxConnect Wireless. Really important. We'll be right back.
I'm Gary Morrow, Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about MaxConnect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using MaxConnect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. MaxConnect. Check it out.
Gary's holding one. I'm holding one too. This one's from PepWave. It doesn't really matter the brand of the 4G LTE modem itself. What counts is the SIM cards that are in it. And the SIM card will connect you to the MaxConnect wireless network over your basic, your popular carriers like AT&T and Verizon and Sprint and T-Mobile. And in Canada, too, they've got an agreement there. This will give you prioritized data and a fixed IP address. You can remotely access your equipment. Check it out. MaxConnect Wireless. It's maxconnectwireless.com. Actually, you can go to maxconnect.com now. They were able to get that name. MaxConnect with 2 X's and a K.com. Check it out. Josh Bone, good friend of mine. And what a service he's done for us in the broadcast industry by putting that company together and getting the technology just right. Kirk Harnack here, along with Frank Foti. He's the chairman of the board and the chief cook and bottle washer and the chief engineer and fireman.
I'm not Sinatra. This chairman of the board thing, that he would have known Sinatra, but not me.
I want to follow up a bit more, Frank, on this, how the recording industry has informed you, and then maybe dial that into your talk about something called the peak unlimiter and how that plays into some songs that we are familiar with, like the Raspberries Go All the Way. So what have you learned? What else have you learned from your friendships in the recording industry?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that, contrary to popular belief, guys on the that produce and engineer, at the top level, they're not against processing. I mean, there's some stuff that, as we all know, we think back 15 years or so, there was that whole thing all about hypercompression where, it got like way over the top. You could take an audio file, put it up in in any basic editor and see square waves and things of that nature. So, and I would tell these guys, hey, look, if you're looking for an affected sound, you can do that, but it doesn't have to sound as, for lack of a better term, grungy, as it did. And there was some material that, I personally just found, I was disappointed in, almost 20 years ago when Bruce Springsteen, somebody who I have a lot of affection for, released the album The Rising. It just, they worked with this producer, Brendan O'Brien, and that thing was just, the drum sounded like you were banging on coffee cans, and I never understood why they wanted to do that. And you mentioned the song by the Raspberries, with a group from Cleveland, actually. Their stuff just sounded like, and I think it was done for effect, because they were trying to replicate being, almost like a cross between the Beatles and the Who all together. So they wanted this big, voluminous, thick as a brick sound, and it is, so recently I had a friend ask me, said, "Hey, look, is there some way that we could, unlimit some of this stuff?" And I've been doing some work in this particular area, and so I've taken, some of the material that I know really well, that I thought was over the top, and been able to, put some life into it, and do it in a way where, and it doesn't take a lot, of being able to, unlimit. And when I say unlimit, Kirk, I'm not saying totally unlimit, but to, restore some dynamics to the audio. And the first step was, getting the mechanism to work. And it goes back to what we're talking about at the top of the program, of figuring things out and how to make it better. And in this case, the challenge became that I noticed that when we start to unlimit things, the ear is fairly quick to notice dynamic changes. And I was able to, put some life into that Springsteen album or some of those Raspberry songs. But if I took that algorithm or that mechanism and applied it to something very dynamic, like Steely Dan, or the song Africa by Toto, it didn't sound right. It was like too unlimited. So it got me thinking. I'm like, wait a minute, we need to have something that can look at the signal and make a decision on its own of, like, what's the density like coming in? I mean, if it's all packed up, the way, to use those early examples, be it, the Raspberries, or, Springsteen, or something that was hyper compressed, 10, 15 years ago, then the algorithm can be more aggressive. But if it's something that already has a fair amount of dynamic range, well, then the algorithm is smart enough to know, well, I'm not going to be as aggressive. And then the result is something that sounds very consistent.
You've mentioned this term, unlimiting, and for some years in broadcast audio processing, we've had declipping, and we've also had Leif Clayson has this undo algorithm, which I think restores some AGC. It gets rid of some AGC or some multi-band AGC. How is unlimiting, what you're talking about, different from those processes?
To say that it's different, I think we're all trying to do the same thing in one form or another. Having worked alongside Leif now for quite a few years, another guy, very smart, very, very capable, and he's brought his own flavor and recipe, if you will, to the world of audio processing. So, what Leif has done was basically to apply some, what he calls undo, to put some dynamics into some material if it was overdone, so that then the broadcaster can then apply whatever signature dynamics control they wish to have. And there's, I understand the logic behind all that, and it makes sense.
Okay. So I recall an explanation of declipping actually, looks for square waves where something's actually clipped, and then
remember,
before
declipping and undo are two different things.
Yeah.
Undo is doing a lot of much the same, peak unlimiting, trying to restore some dynamic range to audio that's been packed up. Declipping is basically looking for square waves and restoring, putting back, the stuff that got whacked out, and to do declipping, and when we have a flavor of it of our own, that's that we're still working on, to make that happen, there's that's not some simple trick. Let me put it to you that way.
Maybe you got a little bit of thought about this, because I think at one point didn't you and Bob Orban write a letter to the recording industry, admonishing them?
We actually, Bob and I actually co-wrote an AES paper.
Oh, okay,
And,
okay.
And I can tell you the reason. I'll never forget the year. It happened to be 20 years ago, and we were going to jointly present it at AES, but because AES that year was supposed to be in New York, and unfortunately a little thing, a sad event by the name of 9/11 occurred, and AES was canceled that year. But I think if you go through the AES journals, you'll be able to find the paper, and I want to say it was like, the title was something to the effect of "What Happens to My Records When They Go Through the Radio" or something like that. And then the mastering engineer, well-known mastering engineer Bob Katz, no relation to Gary Katz, he, I think, has taken our paper and published it in a book that he wrote.
Okay. All right. We got a couple of minutes before we need to take our last break, and I want to ask you about something that the industry has been moving toward, and that is loudness targets. We hear figures like minus 24 LUFS, or loudness units full scale, or minus 23 LUFS, or minus 16 LUFS, or minus 14 LUFS. And different streaming services have standards that you're supposed to follow to put your material on their streaming service. And on the one hand, I understand the reason for this kind of measurement, and so that, everything you watch on TV, for example, isn't just fully loud. And but here's my problem, and we talked about this yesterday. I use this little device right here, this iPhone, to listen to all kinds of content, and I've got a little waterproof thing in my shower that I'll start a podcast and slip this inside, and while I'm washing my hair and washing under my arms and all that, I like to listen to stuff. There are podcasts I can't listen to because they're not loud enough, and I am not deaf. I get my hearing checked, and I don't have to crank things up to hear them. But there's some things that maybe they're meeting some loudness standard, but the hardware. And by the way, I've got a treadmill upstairs. It's got a TV built into it, and it's only so loud. And there are some channels that you can't listen to it because the hardware won't turn up any louder to let you hear it. And I didn't used to have this problem until some of these loudness targets came along. Give me your thoughts on that topic.
Well, I'm happy to. I think I'm still officially a member of one of these AES groups. The reason I say I think is that I stopped attending a lot of the meetings because they end up they kind of turn into what I refer to as like Starbucks coffee clatches. Everyone's got to have an opinion, and they end up writing a spec that I'm not sure really does anything. But to answer your question, Kirk, you can have all these transmission specifications, but the challenge comes to the operating level of the consumer devices. If the operating levels are all are operating differently, sure, the transmitted level may be right, but if the level coming out of, like you say, to your phone in your shower, or whatever the HDMI feed is in your video system, or if it's just a little, audio connector, that's where the challenge becomes, because many of them, the nominal operating level is all over the place. And likewise, I have the same issue in the room that I have all my video watching stuff set up. I have a Roku, I have the cable box, I have a DVD player that also can connect to the internet, and all of them operate at different levels. So doing something that's target loudness related, it needs to be done, I think, for the consumer automatically, so that when if this is my remote, my remote, and I set it to 14, and that's a pleasing level, then everything stays at that pleasing level. It doesn't matter if I'm listening to the Roku or the DVD player or things of that nature. So to put like a target loudness mechanism, and I'm not saying for effect, but to set comfortable listening level so that you, the viewer, can set your volume to whatever you want it to be, and then it just stays there. I really think it's something that we need to do on the consumer side, and I think and again, not make it something that the consumer has to go into a whole bunch of menus and do this and do that. Just make it automatic. Just have it there. And then this way, you turn on your, whatever you want to watch, if it's coming off the computer or what have you, it's just there. It's right every time. And, algorithm design wise, to get that to be right, that's not hard. And if somebody wants to challenge me on it, say, oh, Frank, I can hear it working. You know what? I'll take that challenge. I'm happy to do it.
That topic could probably be a whole show, but thank you for covering it quickly and efficiently right there. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, and Frank has already told us one little war story, the one about Carly Simon, but maybe he's got another little one for us before we have to close out. Our show is brought to you in part by two people, by Radio Guide magazine. Ray Top does this magazine, and what a terrific magazine this is, because they get to go into some detail, some in-depth articles in Radio Guide magazine, engineering articles, and a few things about management and so forth. But there's all kinds of. Here's an article about Intermod coming to a tower near a virus coming to a tower near you, and you get to read these articles in depth. Good stuff. Also, I happen to notice this ad. Frank, do you know anything about this ad right here? I'll never leave your. Oh, I think you were going to sing this, weren't you? Maybe
this
not.
Any business, Kirk. Doesn't look like deep dish to me. Hey, you're making me hungry, buddy. It's coming up on 6 o'clock. I haven't had dinner.
All right, we're going to hear from our friends at Broadcast Bionic, who do a great job and help you do a great job with getting social media out for your broadcast facility. Check it out. We'll be right back.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics, designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need 1 camera for a studio wide shot and usually 1 camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them, and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage, and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Check them out at bionic.radio. Bionic.radio is the website for Broadcast Bionics. And that's not all they have. They have an incredible array of software and systems to get your content that you're already producing and easily get it onto the internet and social sites and give you better interaction with your audience. Check it out at bionic.radio. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring the show. Frank Foti is our guest. We got a few minutes, just a few minutes left.
Kirk, Broadcast Bionics are friends of ours, from England. but I didn't see them knowing that I'm Italian. Where's the tribute to, Forza Azzurri? I mean, we won the Euro Cup.
That's true.
Oh my God.
I know. And all my meetings lately have been with British guys, and here you are, the Italian.
That's
the
right.
Sicilian.
And we won.
That's right. Oh, they
all
were,
right. I know you want to wrap it up.
Yeah. Our producer has to go home. I think he's got bedtime coming up. So sorry, son guest. Frank, you may have another. You mentioned a guy named Dwayne Kuiper, or you've got another story you'd like to regale us with before we have to go.
Kirk, the story I'd like to share with you guys was it goes back to my Z100 days, and at that time there was Z100 competed with WPLJ in the same way that my Ohio State Buckeyes take it out on a team north of Toledo. And we were, it was like, we were killing one another. My general manager asked me to get the local engineers together to discuss everybody dialing back the modulation to be legal. And make a super long story short, at the end of the luncheon, the chief engineer at WPLJ, a gentleman by the name of Bob Deitch, we had a lot of respect for one another, although it was like, it was intense competition. And so Bob says, hey, if you don't mention who you are, have you ever seen the studios at PLJ? And I said, no. He goes, well, I'll just bring you into the radio station. I'll give you some fake name and I'll show you the radio station. So we go up there and he's showing me the I remember meeting Pat St. John in the studio, and their program director was a gentleman by the name of Larry Berger. And Larry and Scott Shannon, I mean, you want to talk about going at it. Larry and Scott, I mean, it's some of the greatest radio competition ever was Scott and Larry. So we happen to walk into this production studio, and there's Larry Berger. And Bob says, Larry, I've got a friend of mine in from out of town. His name's Bob Johnson. He's he's an audio consultant, and I'm just showing him the studios. I'd like you, Bob, Larry, Bob. And Larry looks at me right in the eye, not knowing who I was, and he said, how can I sound like Z100? Honest to God, so bad. I wanted to take out my wallet and give him my business card, which said Frank Foti, Chief Engineer Z100. But Bob would have lost his job. So I go back to the radio station. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon. Shannon happened to still be at the station. I'm telling this story to our GM and to Shannon. Shannon's like, Franco, that's a damn great story. I'm going to go on the air right now and tell that story. I'm like, Scott, you can't. The guy will lose his job. I had to literally hold Scott Shannon out of this air studio. But Scott wanted to go on the air and tell that story about PLJ and Z100.
That's great.
That level of competition, Kirk, I miss it. So the only way I get that infusion is the last college football game of the season. I just have to wait for my Ohio State Buckeyes to get ready and go take care of business with that team up north.
I know I'm asking a lot.
Kirk's going, Frank, you just blew off all our customers, north of Toledo. Sorry, guys. It's just,
Go blue.
Uh-oh.
There was Suncast in our ears there. Go blue. Hey,
give me the go blue. Give me that, because my high school, the Wicklow Blue Devils, blue and gold, that team up north illegally stole our colors. So we've negotiated in a lawsuit a new color for them. Clear. And you took our W and you flipped it upside down. So Kirk's like, when did we go off the rails?
If you don't mind, let's switch it right back to one track for just a second. I know I'm asking a lot of you. Great story with Bob Johnson over at PLJ.
Yep.
Can you leave us with an actual tip of the week, something that we can take home and either crank into our processor, or just how do we make ourselves sound better? What's a good Frank Foti tip of the week here?
Kirk, rather than say, do this or do that with your audio processor, something that I've always found that I think is a challenge for a lot of people is, you know, when it comes to setting up audio processing, you have to have a reference monitoring location. And that could be at the radio station, so, you know, where you have a good signal coming in off a receiver, with speakers that you trust, where you're able to listen to your signal, competing signals or whatever signals. And especially in today's day and age where you have clusters, you know, it's good to have a dedicated monitoring area where you can listen to your, you know, if you're in charge of, let's say, 3 or 4 radio stations, you know, you can listen to all of them and do what needs to be done. And in my travels, even to this day, that's something that seems to be a challenge for some. So I know it may not sound like something much, but I strongly recommend that you have a dedicated area to monitor the sound, and there needs to be like one person who is the final say-so in the sound of the radio station. You know, in many cases, it's a program director. Some cases, it might be the owner. Some cases, it may even be the chief engineer. You know, I was very fortunate where I was able to set the sound for Z100, but I knew what they wanted. And, you know, because Scott Shannon would say, Franco, I don't know this stuff. You do it. But if it wasn't right, Scott would let me know. And we had a great bond, and which we have to this very day, by the way. And so to that effect, but I also had a great monitoring area at the radio station. Yeah, I used my car. Yeah, I'd listen in so-and-so's car, but I always came back to my reference. And if we got it right on the reference, 99.9% of the time, it was right all the time.
Gotcha. How do you know your reference is good? I've had an owner tell me how to adjust the processing. He was listening in a car that hit expensive stereo system, but his system was muffled, and so he asked me to crank the highs way up, and it was not good. How do you know your reference is good?
Okay. When I worked at Z100, the studios were in Secaucus, New Jersey, where we had a line of sight to Empire and World Trade. So one of the things I did was I had an excellent FM receiver where I was able to measure and adjust out as much as possible. Very little multipath. I had everything set for flat. I had 2 sets of speakers that we used. They had a pair of JBL studio monitors. We had something else. So I trusted it. You know, I trusted it. There was nothing gimmicky about it. And sure, we would listen on little speakers, table radios. We tested in our cars and that kind of thing. But it always came back to the reference. And that's what we used.
It sounds like you proved that the reference was good by referencing other stuff, and then realized, yep, that reference really is good. Whatever we do on that results in good results elsewhere.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Frank, thank you for being with us. I appreciate you so very much, taking the time to be with us. And what are you going to be doing after the show here? You something with trains?
Well, as much as I would like to, the weather here is going to change within the next hour. So I'm going to, the people that I'm with, I'm going to, I think, enjoy a hot dog and then get Eastwind and his little entourage safely ensconced in the covered trailer and let Mother Nature do her thing.
Good deal. Well, I'm sure you'll be giving some rides to more adults and kids in the coming days and weeks there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Good deal. Frank Foti, the chairman of the board and founder of Cutting Edge, becoming Omnia, and a guy who really knows his way around an audio processor and sound. So many things we didn't get to talk about that we're going to have to do it another time. Like, when does virtualized audio processors, when do they come into the picture? We're going to talk to Frank another time about that. Software versus a box. A lot of interesting thoughts about that. We got to go. Thanks a lot to our sponsors. Thanks to you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe on our YouTube channel. That would be great if you do that. Tell your friends, and also like and like us on Facebook too. That'd be terrific. We got thanks to Suncast for putting the show together and producing the whole show. Thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. We got to go. Tom Ray is next week. He's going to be talking about some power tales. So watch for Tom Ray next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.